And like I said, Steve, I have just a few remarks to get everybody updated if they need to know more things about the data users group. And
Sounds
then
good.
I will turn it over to you. We had 51 people register for this, which is actually a really great turnout. So I'm hoping that half of that shows up. That's usually the
The numbers.
good thing. Yeah, when half of the people show up, that's great.
Well, the pressure's on then. That's a good group.
Well, that the way that these things work, it's so nice because the people that are registering are the people that are really interested in your topic. So we have, the kind of that niche group of people that are librarians and others that are into data and GIS and geography.
It's awesome.
Okay, we're about to get started, everybody. So I'm going to ask everyone on the meeting that you make sure that you're on mute. And it's just about 10 a.m., so we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone, to our June INDUG meeting. The last time we met, it was March, and hopefully some of you were able to attend our meeting last time. Since then, we've continued the process of supporting data users across the country who are aware of missing national data and data sets. We have also collected some new historical census volumes new to our collection, just in case we need to digitize anything very quickly to make sure that we have access to that historical data. Just in case anything happens with the Census Bureau site, we have all of that data between the State Library and Indiana University. We pretty much have it covered as far as the census goes, back to 1790. We've got those print volumes for you here at the library, and we can get you access to the historical tables through the NHGIS. So please continue to help support your coworkers and colleagues with data needs. All of the SDCs, the state data centers, are here to help. So the state data centers across the country are aware of the data rescue efforts that are going on, and every state is basically here to help you with any of your data needs. If you don't know me yet, I'm Katharine Springer. I'm the director of the Indiana State Data Center at the State Library. We're a program that partners with the U.S. Census Bureau and the states. I help data users get access to good public data. That's our mission. So I hope you've been able to take part of some of the opportunities for learning that have been out there lately. Indiana Data Day that is held every year by the MPH was May 14th. So if you didn't make it this time around, be aware of that for next year. It's always in May. It's a great day held downtown Indianapolis every year at the conference center, and many state agencies. It's sort of like a science fair for data nerds for the state of Indiana. So please try to attend that in May of next year. We also had the IGIC conference, the GIS conference that happens every year, and that was May 20th through 22nd. Also a really good thing to put on your calendar so that you know about it. There's also an American Community Survey Data Users Conference every year. It's free and it's online. This year it was May 29th. So again, all of those things that come up almost every year in May, and just keep your eyes and ears open for those next year. We would like to welcome Steve Aldrich, PhD and GISP. He is a GIS specialist at the State Geographic Information Office, or GIO. He is a former GIS teacher, and that is what I learned about him first when I first met him. But I know that there's more to that story, so that's why I've invited him to speak with us today. So take it away, Steve.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'm very honored to be asked to talk with you all. And actually, when Katie invited me, I didn't even know about INDUG, and so this is something I'm excited to engage with and plan on attending future meetings. So it's good to meet you all. And you know, when Katie asked me if I'd be willing to talk to everybody for a little bit, you know, she mentioned it'd be interesting to hear about how I kind of got into GIS. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, which is a little bit different maybe than some people's, but I think we all have unique stories. And so I'm not here to say that my story is cooler than anyone else's or anything like that. But as Katie mentioned, before I joined the state about 2.5 years ago, I was a faculty member at Indiana State University and in environmental science. And I taught GIS and spatial statistics and regular stats too, along with remote sensing and then environmental science topics for about 14 years there. So, but my journey to GIS professional, you know, had a lot of stops along the way, and so I'd like to talk about those a little bit. And then I'll kind of end up talking about open data resources in GIS in the state of Indiana, just so that everybody's kind of familiar. You probably know about most, if not all, of these tools, but it's always nice to make sure that people know what's available. So this cover kind of picture here is kind of illustrates how far I'll go for data. I've done data collection on multiple continents for a variety of different projects. This one in particular, this picture was taken along the Trans-Amazon Highway. You can see what a glorious highway this is. It is literally just a dirt road that stretches all the way from the coast of Brazil to the depths of the Amazon, sort of close to Porto Velho in Rondônia, which is a state in the Western Amazon, right? So in this particular instance, you know, we were driving from our field site to our hotel and, you know, got stuck by a cavalgada, which is just a cattle drive, right? So I've had some interesting challenges while collecting data. We'll talk about some of those. But one thing I wanted to kind of start off with was to ask maybe if one or two of you would be willing to throw out there how you came to understand how important data really are for the world. Does anyone have any examples or anything that really sparked them to pay attention to data as they were a young person or even a mature person? Okay, well, if you don't want to jump in, that's fine. I'll tell you what inspired me. Well, okay, yeah, so Mary said watching my dad work through his dissertation, and that is, yeah, that's a struggle that I've participated in. You know, genealogy, that's another really good one. It's like, wow, if we didn't track this information, like, how are we going to know where we came from? And this kind of stuff, these are two examples that have inspired me in my journey as a data professional, right? But for me, you know, two of the big things that I can remember were the almost complete back catalog of National Geographics that my family had amassed, and also literally the World Book Encyclopedia. So I had a pretty different background than many. I grew up in a fundamentalist religious community and was homeschooled all the way through. So here's just some pictures from my childhood. Yeah, I was a Larry Bird fan even as a kid. Even though I didn't grow up in Indiana, I was a Boston kid, right? And spent a lot of my childhood in rural Vermont. You know, but this meant that I didn't have kind of some of the formal academic training that a lot of people did. In fact, I don't have a high school diploma. I got a GED at 16 because I hit a point where I thought school was pretty boring. And I was working in a wood shop and for a general contractor making, I don't know, probably if you incorporate inflation, about as much as I do now. And, you know, academics wasn't that important to me, right? But I had a couple interventions that kind of set me off on a different path. And we don't have to get into too many details, but essentially, when I was about 15, I was convinced that I should go and live abroad for a while. I stayed, and not as part of like a religious mission. I went and stayed with a few Americans who had fled to communist liberated parts of China during the 1940s. And I stayed with them on their mechanized dairy farm outside of Beijing for almost half a year. And then from there went and lived in southern India with the mother of a friend for another 5 months, right? And so at this point, I came back to rural Vermont from living abroad in very different conditions and kind of realized, hey, there's a lot about the world that I don't know about. And maybe I should continue to learn and not just learn how to make really nice custom cabinets, but also maybe learn things that don't immediately feel applicable in my day-to-day life. And so I went to community college, and there I took a stats class. And you know, everyone hates stats unless you are a weirdo and you love stats. But actually, I was both of those things. I hated stats and thought that it was hard, but then I learned about kind of tendencies in large data sets to show actual trends, and kind of got inspired to learn about how data can really give us a clear picture about what is going on, right? Or lead to really cool other questions. And so after taking some community college courses, I got my GED and ended up going to university at the normal age of about 18. And there, I kind of got inspired by two things. One, I connected with this faculty member here, a fellow in the green shirt. I'm in the blue shirt. His name is Gil Pontius, and he's a faculty member at Clark University. And he was very much, he was a brand new faculty member and kind of decided like, hey, Steve can help me with a few things. And so we got into a lot of kind of local environment focused statistical analyses, right? And ended up actually doing some presentations. I did as a 19-year-old, did some presentations at the Marine Biological Labs in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and even published a paper with Gil, you know, on nitrate loading and deforestation in the Ipswich River watershed in Massachusetts, which is just north of Boston. It's the kind of watershed that kind of drains into the Bay of Boston, north of the city a little bit, right? So, but also during this time, and if you go to university, you go to college, you often have transformative experiences. And, you know, for me, it was taking geography and environmental science courses and stats. I got a job in the library. I had already worked at the community college. I worked doing interlibrary loan, which, if you can imagine, ILL in a community college in rural Vermont is pretty much the only way the community college gets library resources, right? And so, I mean, we had a library in the facility closest to my house that was a little bit larger than the focus room I'm in now, right? So it was a lot of ILL work. When I went to four-year college, I worked in a library archives and special collections. But then I got kind of convinced to take a systems admin job in the GIS lab in the geography department. And at the same time, I was working with this faculty member, Gil Pontius, and doing some, at the time, it would have been considered big data work because we had, a couple million observations and, working with high-end computers in the late 1990s on millions of observations was something you almost could brag about. And during this time, I got exposed to things about data that were really important, things like metadata and provenance. Where are your data coming from? Are we maintaining a temporal record of how things have changed? And all this was really important for doing analysis as part of a National Science Foundation long-term ecological research site, which the Ipswich River watershed was. I don't know if it is anymore, given changes to the National Science Foundation's funding priorities, but it may still be an LTER. I didn't take the time to look that up, right? So, and this included working at the university level with a metadata working group, trying to figure out what we should require of undergraduate and graduate students and faculty as they worked with geospatial data to ask and answer research questions. Another, though, influence was family. So here's a picture of my grandfather, Doug Aldrich. Doug actually was the one who I would probably, this is just a little while before he passed away, I would probably credit Doug with getting me kind of turned on to geospatial data. And the kind of mechanism was odd. He was, I had a pretty good relationship with all my grandparents. They didn't live close by, but we saw them regularly enough. And Doug would tell me, "Hey, here's this new technology. You should look into this." And he gave me some books about GPS. And I ended up reading them, and this was my kind of introduction to we can track location with a reasonable level of accuracy using satellites. And that kind of kicked off my interest, in addition to being a systems admin in a GIS lab, and then eventually doing some work with the GIS company Clark Labs Idrisi, which is a GIS software you don't see use too much in the United States, but it's used quite a bit in the developing world. Yeah, Doug's missing a couple fingers. I watched him cut those off with a table saw. Did you know that there's a table saw accident every 29 seconds in the United States? Be safe when you're using saws. All right, so this kind of led to, as you can imagine, a couple things in my history kind of led to an interest in travel, right? So I told you that when I kind of stopped doing homeschool, which I joke sometimes makes me a double loser, right? In some people's mind. When I stopped doing homeschool, I did end up being convinced to go and live abroad, and I was fortunate to have the ability to do that. And then through my undergraduate academic kind of preparation, I got interested in doing research, doing real data analysis to understand how the world was changing and why. And so over my kind of, I don't know, I guess you could say over my lifetime, I've spent a lot of time traveling, and some of that's been for fun. Right? I've traveled to 15 countries solely for fun or for experience. And then other places it's been for research or both, right? So I've done research quite a bit in Latin America and Asia, and a little bit in Europe as well. And when I say travel, I mean we're actually going to collect data, right? So this kind of really kicked off international data collection when I began my master's degree. So I was really fortunate. I ended up getting a research assistantship for my master's program at Michigan State University, and was working initially on a project on urban growth modeling in northwestern Michigan, so the Muskegon River watershed. So it's kind of most of the counties on the Lake Michigan coastline, all the way down to Grand Rapids, right? And we were kind of trying to predict basically suburbanization. But about a year into that project, I went to my advisor and was like, "Bob, this is really boring." And he threw up his arms and he's like, "Oh, thank God, I was waiting for you to ask about a different project." And so I started to do work on agrarian land markets along the Trans-Amazon Highway, and ended up going to do some field work over multiple summers along the Trans-Amazon, around the small town of Uruara, which is kind of midway between Altamira on the Trans-Amazon and kind of the end where the road just peters out, right? So this is, in a very remote place, and we would spend, 4 weeks at a time with a field crew driving down settlement roads that look like the one on the left with the truck going across this high quality bridge. And a lot of opening and closing gates, which I became an expert at, in addition to field data methods, right? We had only 3 failed suspensions, 12 flat tires, and 1 destroyed truck front end during these data collection efforts, mainly due to like rocks and other hazards that you couldn't avoid in the dust cloud that comes up as you're following other vehicles down a tropical dirt highway, right? I also did my PhD as a Spartan, and that one was partially self-funded through getting grants with the Tinker Foundation and the State Department and the university itself, and then research assistantships, and was able to do a doctoral dissertation on contentious land change, which is how land conflict over land ownership and land access actually leads to enhanced deforestation. So for every conflict event in the Eastern Amazon, I did some fixed effects panel regression analysis that showed for every conflict event in the Eastern Amazon, there'd be about 32 hectares or about 64 acres of increased deforestation, which when you look at the whole Amazon, I mean, that's an alarming number, 64 acres of deforestation. But when you look at the whole Amazon, hey, that's a drop in the bucket, probably less than a drop in the bucket. However, a lot of the properties that I analyzed, these 180 ranches that I did work on, they had upwards of, some of them dozens to over 100 conflict events. And when you add that up or you do that multiplication, the numbers start to get more alarming, right? And so I was kind of pushing for what I would call social process drivers of land transformation. But when you're a student, you also have to take classes and stuff that you don't think is that interesting. So I did some soil mapping and also some field methods of remote sensing work. So picture down here on the left is a couple of my colleagues and I doing some work with a field spectrometer on campus in East Lansing. And then, because most of this data analysis was field driven, I spent quite a bit of time driving on horrible roads and then hanging out with interesting people. And a lot of times these, because I'm talking about conflict and talking with individuals about conflict and strife, conversations would be tense at first, but often end up being very friendly later as they realized I was not a police officer or a journalist. Those are scary people. I was a harmless, friendly academic, right? So after I finished my PhD, I was fortunate enough during the 2008-2009 financial crash to actually get a tenure track faculty job. And as many of you probably realize, faculty job, just like a librarian's job, right, and many others, you're not doing one job, even though you're supposedly doing one job that might have a number of responsibilities. You're doing lots of different things, right? And so, from trying to put together funds to renovate our observatory dome at Indiana State University, to using the roof of my building as a place to set up GPS base stations to teach people how to use field GPS, to marching around fields on campus with gimbal stabilized GoPros to learn how to use structure for motion analytics to create 3-dimensional models, to sorting through thousands of legacy data tapes containing Landsat imagery ranging as far back as 1973 to make sure that we weren't going to lose data if we disposed of these tapes, right, from the overall temporal archive of Landsat data. I spent a lot of time in the land of data, either teaching about it or using it, or using new techniques to capture data to stay current in my discipline and be able to teach students what the latest and greatest technologies for data collection are, right? I was really fortunate to be able to spend time bringing students to international places to kind of pass that love of travel and discovery on to them as they learned about the world, just as I did as an undergrad. Was able to bring students to Thailand and to China multiple times each, and do some student-driven research with them there. In kind of collaboration with faculty in both those countries. And, you know, every time you go somewhere, you experience something new, like eating barbecued insects in northeastern China with people who survived the Cultural Revolution and were kind of making a point that, hey, this is what we had to eat every day. And then also spending some time recruiting students into our programs from you know, nations where we're developing better relationships, including some recruitment in China and Vietnam during my time as a faculty member. Of course, you have to do research as a faculty member, and so I kind of extended upon some of my previous work in Brazil. I've spent well over a year of my life in Brazil doing field work, all in the Amazon region. And, you know, I spent time working with people to learn about their home gardens, and how gift networks I was kind of assisting on a project with this, how gift networks kind of develop community outside of religious and family structures. And so in Brazil, you don't ever go to someone's house without a gift for them. And one of the best things you can bring is some produce from your garden or a house plant. And in fact, I've had people bring me these things when we were just having a meeting before. So having, you know, conversations in people's urban backyards and then going with them on the weekend to see what their sitio, their rural homestead is like, and to learn about how goods flow between their urban home and their rural home, because most households in rural Brazil are multi-sited, meaning some of the families in urban areas and some are in rural. I've spent quite a bit of time also, though, in less glamorous places doing data work. Obviously, when you talk to people about their fights that they're involved in, it's pretty hard to get straight answers and people's memory gets foggy, right? And so, and there's not really good data collection along this. I don't mean to discount some of the data collection work that non-governmental entities in Brazil were doing around land conflict. For example, the Pastoral Land Commission, which is affiliated with the Catholic Church in Brazil, was doing quite a bit of work to capture and track information about land conflict. And so I went to local newspaper archives and actually captured information about conflict and assembled databases there for that 27-year panel analysis that I already talked about. Another thing that happened to me, was done to me, maybe you could say, is you have to get involved in administration at some point when you become a faculty member, whether it's serving on committees or making sure that you know that work processes are being done properly. I was an interim department chair for a little while, and having to talk to people about ethics and their use of data and use of specimens was something that unfortunately I had to do a few times in that context. But also, you know, staying current is something I wanted to emphasize. As we work with data, we have to be aware of evolutions in technology and data capture. And so one of the things I really tried to do was to learn the kind of latest state of the art in data collection techniques for geospatial analysis. And one of these was using drones and also photogrammetric techniques where you capture lots of overlapping photos and create very detailed data sets of these, including a project in Pompeii that I kind of wanted to just show you the sorts of things that we can do. So give me a moment to get this pulled up. Should be possible in a second. So I think you should be able to see this 3D model as it loads in on your screen. This is part of the Insula 14 project in the ancient city of Pompeii. And so this is an active archaeological excavation. They'll be excavating in a couple weeks here, actually. But we've used this kind of drone and terrestrial collected imagery to create 3D models of the excavation process that we can rewind through time. And so I don't have this set up to show you in this example, and it takes a little while to load in a web scene. But what we can do is actually, because we capture these 3D models and tie them into each other in space every day, we can rewind an excavation to see what it looked like before the excavation happened and what the excavation looked like as it was going on, right? So using this kind of high quality, we're looking at maybe 3 millimeters accuracy, right, in 3-dimensional space, right, as a tool or technique to collect data. So this is my colleague Matt and my other colleague Aaron, who helped with this. This is a project run out of Tulane University. Allison Emerson is the PI. And the focus here is really, it's a place on the urban periphery of Pompeii, and kind of trying to understand how people's lives were in that position, in that part of the city, by looking at what they left behind, right? Including in latrines and kind of compost piles and stuff like that. It's pretty interesting. Now, using these technologies, we can also visualize data in new ways. This is a drone scan of Monte Alban, the archaeological site that my colleague and good friend Alex Bedijo has put together through the Monte Alban project. This model actually now resides at the museum at Monte Alban. I don't know if it's on display yet, but this is a model taken with a 3D drone scan and then 3D printed onto an elevated 3D printed platform, and then kind of assembled almost like a really easy jigsaw puzzle, right? So kind of staying up on kind of new technologies that allow us to bring experiences to people in different ways has been kind of something I've tried to do and try to do even now. So as I mentioned before, and I'm almost done, I promise, I now work in the Geographic Information Office, as Katie mentioned. I'm a GIS technical specialist, and I've been working here for about 2.5 years. And, what does it mean to be a GIS technical specialist? Well, I have kind of 2 jobs in my job. One of them is to help keep the machines running and the data coming, right? So I'm part of the enterprise operations team, and we very much do the IT part of GIS. But then the other part of my job is supporting state agencies, and when it comes to me, even people from the general public who have questions about our open data platform, which is indianamap.org, right? And then also when people have questions about kind of more technical questions about how to use imagery and elevation data, which you can get from the IU GIS data portal, right? The Indiana Spatial Data Portal that's run through IU, or you can get from our Amazon Web Services Open Data Bucket. And so I put this picture here because this F4 Phantom on the decks of the USS Midway in San Francisco, which I got to check out when I was going to the Esri annual user conference last summer, was actually one of the planes that my grandfather, Doug, helped develop the avionics for during his career in aviation electronics, right? Working for IBM. So kind of to bring it back full circle, Doug set me off on this journey, and I get to appreciate what he brought to me. So I want to end with a quote. Although I don't think Ian Fleming is maybe the best role model that we can have, he did say, never say no to adventures, always say yes, otherwise you'll lead a very dull life. And this is something that I've been thinking about quite a bit lately. The number of times I had the opportunity to say no, but didn't, led me to a very data-rich lifestyle that I live in now, like live at work and my personal life. I'm still very data engaged, right? So I appreciate you listening to me rant about my experiences becoming a data scientist. I wanted to put this up. If you're interested in what we're doing in the Geographic Information Office, we have a monthly newsletter. And right now we're soliciting feedback from folks about what we're doing well and what we're not doing well, what you'd like to see from our office in terms of outreach, new types of data, or anything related. We're a friendly group. If you go to in.gov/GIS, you can learn kind of about our initiatives. And then if you want any questions you might have about our data offerings or kind of what we do, I'm always happy to answer. And so I don't want to make you listen to me talk more. So that's what I have prepared for today, but I'd like to talk about any kind of data related things that you might be interested in hashing out. Mary, I'm sorry you watched my YouTube GIS tutorials. So one of the things I did when teaching GIS is I would have students would be like, I can't figure this out, right? And rather than only help them, I was like, well, I should start posting this to a non-monetized YouTube channel. And so I do have some videos on there. I had somebody from INDOT message me out of the blue one day and be like, hey, are you this guy? And they put a link to the YouTube channel. I sadly don't make any content there these days, but I've considered doing it kind of on my own on the side. So maybe you'll see new videos posted there in the future.
Hey, so does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask Steve, either in the chat or if you feel free to unmute and chime in? I'm going to give you a moment to think while I ask him a question. So, Steve, this is fascinating. I had no idea that you had lived in China and India as a young person.
Yeah.
So fascinating, and such rich experiences to have at such a young age. In all of your travels, now that you've been to so many different places and interacted with so many people, but still in the data and geography frame, what are some of the things that you've learned that are maybe a thread that goes through no matter what country you're in, no matter what kind of data you're collecting? Can you talk about maybe that, like a commonality thread between all of these places?
Yeah, there are a couple things that come to mind, and thank you, Katie. That's a cool question. So I mentioned a couple times that I've taken lots of statistics courses and taught regular stats and spatial stats, which are very different from each other, which might lead you to think that I'm a very quantitatively minded person, and I am. I mean, I think numbers are really important, but one of the things from working with people, both in just travel for personal enrichment, but also travel for research context, is that the qualitative matters a whole hell of a lot to understand the context for quantitative data, or to show you where the quantitative data might be falling short, right? So, a great example. Well, I don't know if it's a great example, but an interesting example of this might be, some of the, for example, I went to China in the mid 1990s, and you could look up in my World Book Encyclopedia all kinds of information about China, and I spent quite a bit of time reading about China while I was there, because the deal was I would work a shift on the farm. It was a dairy farm. Interestingly, registered Holsteins, and the Holstein Association was from my hometown in Vermont. So interesting, weird international links, right? But there was all kinds of info about, like, well, this is what people do to make a living, and this is how many people live here, and just to then talk to folks, and this is what people are not allowed to do, like learning about how in China at the time you couldn't migrate from one province to another without permission, right? But then to see people who were in a place illegally but still fully engaged with an economy, you wouldn't get from the numbers because the numbers were not correct. But also, even if you went and collected the numbers, the honesty to bring to a foreigner wouldn't be there, especially initially. So you talk to somebody on the farm, you're like, hey, did you grow up near here? And they're like, yes. Right? And you're like, I know that's probably not true, right? And then to find out after working with them day in and day out for months that they actually came from the south of China and have been living in Shahe for, 12 years, right? And so there's this kind of qualitative data is just as important to understand where maybe your blind spots are. And then trust is something you have to build when you collect data, right? So move from China to Brazil. In Brazil, and this is kind of a stereotypically Latino kind of thing to do, but you don't talk business during an initial meeting ever, right? The initial meeting is to start to build that trust relationship. And so to get information that I could turn into hard data, numerical data even to analyze in complex regression models, there was a lot of work that went into building trust and then understanding the context. If a rancher's like, yeah, I kicked 400 vagrants off my property because they were destroying it. And then, my follow-up question is, how did you kick off 400 people? That seems like 1 versus 400. Well, I hired 20 gunmen and they pushed them out of their homes and burned their shacks to the ground and made them leave for good, right? Well, no one's going to tell you that during an initial meeting, right? Nobody, especially when, legally that person could face pretty serious repercussions. But after working with somebody like that, very carefully, by the way, for weeks and weeks, you can finally uncover that info. So I guess qualitative matters. Data takes a lot of work. And sometimes the data we get the first time is wrong, like just flat out, absolutely incorrect, right? And so working across these different places has been enlightening in that way, because I feel like I've learned a little bit about how to I don't know, you could spin it either way. Get data from people or, really gain people's trust in order to understand the true story, or at least a more truer version of the story, right? Even in a place like Italy, earning trust is necessary. So we would go for this Pompeii project. I was only involved the first year, and I took a job with the state, so I just kind of monitor from afar now. But even there, we would go every day we had taken over a hostel as a group, like all of us. There were probably 30 of us living in a single hostel, in like bunk beds and everything. This was only a couple years ago. We would walk every day from our hostel to the archaeological park, and they have guards, and there's a protocol to get in. And the first 2 days, the guards gave us a hell of a time. You've got to show your permission letter. I need to see your passport. And I'm only going to speak to you in Italian, which I speak Portuguese and a very little bit of Chinese. And sometimes I speak English okay. And, Italian is not that similar, even though it's a Romance language, right, to Portuguese. And, that not getting flustered and upset when the protocol was followed to the letter the first 2 times, but then realizing once you're recognized and you haven't misbehaved, that, then that level of trust gets to a point where you can start showing people what it is that you're doing without them being skeptical, right? And by the end of that, it was only a couple of weeks. By the end of being there, the security staff were asking us, "Hey, there's somebody hopped the wall. Did you see them?" Right? And this kind of thing in English, right? To our team of almost all English speakers, right? So I think trust is a big part of data, and there are a lot of ways to get to trust. Sorry, rambling answer to your question.
Very, very good points. The trust aspect, especially, and that data takes work. That any form of data collection is actually it takes building that trust. Now I'm going to ask you a very whimsical question.
Yeah.
So, did you ever go to Burger King Pompeii?
You mean like the actual Burger King there?
Yes.
No, but every day I walk by the McDonald's, and one Friday we were coming back from the excavation site at about 8 p.m. And so the sun was starting to get down and we were all sweaty and dirty. And even though I was part of the digital data team, I still was out there, working in that 104-degree heat. And we kind of come around the corner and there's like dance music. We were like, what is going on? And it was like an electronic dance music party in front of McDonald's at about 8 p.m. on a Friday. So that's my only fast food experience in Pompeii. But I haven't been to the Burger King. Tell me about it. What's up with the Burger
Oh,
King?
I happened to go to Pompeii, and our bus took a turn, and all of a sudden I see in the window framed the Burger King sign, and I am just shocked because I've just walked through Pompeii, and then there was Burger King, and it actually said Burger King Pompeii on the sign. And of course I captured an image of that because it was fascinating. But Pompeii was an incredible experience, and
Yeah.
to see that you before this presentation, I saw on maybe a CV of yours that you had been involved in studying Pompeii, and that 3D modeling is incredible, and the level of accuracy that you're able to get is
Yeah.
I just can't believe it. I love the comment that you made about the fact that you're able to rewind and see what had happened before the excavation. It is just one of those really great things that technology now allows us to do.
It's pretty wild because the protocol there is you start with a base model. So before any excavation gets going, you make a base model, and then every day in every one of the stratigraphic units, we take imagery and create this 3D model. But it's a really fascinating combination of high and low tech, right? So structure from motion photogrammetry is how you make these 3D models from those overlapping images, right? But then tying them in three-dimensional space, you need correspondence points that you know the location of, that you can see in the imagery, and you can link to three-dimensional space. And you know how we do that? Fingernail polish. So we make little marks of fingernail polish on the reconstructed walls, so we don't hit the old stuff with any kind of thing that could harm it. But the reconstructed walls from like the 1940s and 50s, we put usually pink nail polish because it shows up really well, and it's not a color we're going to see in the landscape there very often. And then you literally just tie those points. You get the known locations for each of the nail polish points that we put in there. And then you can snap the model right into its correspondence points in the same location. And so it's this kind of cool mix of like, we've got high accuracy total station, high accuracy GPS and drones, and then like a little less high tech, some nice digital cameras, and then nail polish. So it's a lot of fun. I
Yeah.
see there's a question in the chat from Judy. Yeah, so it sounds like Judy's library is going to be getting some GIS software for their library through a third-party vendor, and they want to gain an understanding of where their cardholders are coming from, and then their use of digital products and their participation in in-person programs. So yeah, so a couple pieces of advice there. An address is a location, although it's not necessarily a super accurate one, because there's a difference between like, this is the parcel that an address is on, and here's the actual building or unit within the building that address corresponds to. But if you capture where people live and it's not a PO box, right? So you want their street address, not their mailing address. You can very easily turn that into point location. And you can turn that into a point location using the state's geocoder, which is free. And I can drop a resource for that in the chat. You're gonna have to see my web browser for a minute here. So I'll put the link to information about the geocoder in our chat, in the chat here. So this should be accessible to everybody, unless you live outside North America. Here there's info on how to use the state geocoder. So it's free, and it uses data supplied by the counties every year as part of our data harvest program. And so if you capture information about like if you have a sign-in sheet, it could be really low tech, right? It could just be a piece of paper and then you enter it into a spreadsheet where you solicit people's street addresses, right? I mean, you don't even have to have their name, because I know we want to be sensitive about who's, from an ethical standpoint, who's using services, what they're using, because we do want to make sure that people's privacy and right to access to information isn't impinged by their, like, let's say, legal status. Maybe, I mean, this is maybe a controversial principle, but it's one I personally take pretty seriously. And then you can use that geocoder to turn those into point locations on a map. If your GIS software that you're getting access to through your vendor is online GIS, there's some interesting tools that allow you to collect that information digitally, like have a QR code. Person shows up to an in-person program at your library, scan the QR code, put in their street address. It'll automatically feed into what we call a feature service, which would be like a map service online that you can display on an internal dashboard or internal map that shows where these folks are. So the technology can be quite advanced and kind of seamless, or you can go low tech, either way. And then I would say once you start amassing data about who's using your library's resources, it'll give you some interesting insights like, hey, this neighborhood, no one's using it. What's going on there? Oh, well, they're more affluent. Well, more affluent people like libraries too. Why don't we figure out how to market our services or our resources to those people differently, maybe? Or maybe we just need to get in that school's, parent newsletter, whatever it might be. And you all know those, the librarians on the call know those strategies much better than I. But, and then, I would encourage you to think about maybe looking at indianamap.org, not just to see it as a resource, but you can actually use the online tools there as a community member. And this is something that we've been trying to kind of get the word out about. If you can see Indiana Map on my screen and kind of show you what I'm talking about. So yeah, Indiana Map has open data. And there are some videos and guides that we've been slowly growing on the site as a resource. My colleague Ben has made some really good videos that kind of walk people through really quickly. They're not 30-minute long videos, they're like 5-minute long videos on how to do some things. But then you can also create an account and sign in to Indiana Map. Now, at first, Indiana Map looks just normal. But if I go to my community page here, you can actually publish data yourself to Indiana Map. Now, you can't use this for work. It violates the terms of service, but a community member can use this for their own exploration. So I had let's see if I can look our data. We go to all content here. So this is actually fully it's a full online GIS software suite. It's ArcGIS Online, and you can create any kind of these, let me see here, any kind of these online GIS, I want to open it here, open an ArcGIS Online, any kind of GIS product that you can create in a commercial ArcGIS Online. And these are free accounts, anyone can make them. They don't even have to be limited to being a Hoosier to make one of these accounts. And this is an example. My neighborhood was having a discussion about rental properties, and a lot of the residents there were talking about how rental properties bring home prices down. I live in a wonderful suburban insanity place, But you know, one of the things that I was pointing out is that no, actually, some of the assessed values, which is this third dimension here, are actually highest next to rental homes, right? For example, this place right here is right across the street from 2 rental homes, and it's, you know, got quite a high property valuation. And so my contribution to the actual debate within my neighborhood was, let's use data instead of feelings in this case. And maybe it's not the renters that are the problem, right? Renters are an important part of a healthy community. Let's not penalize them. Let's penalize maybe, or at least pay attention to what sort of people own these properties, right? It's a debate that continues. But Indiana Map, once I'm in the ArcGIS Online part, I have access to a lot of different tools for interacting with and creating geographic data. It's probably beyond time for me to go through every single one of these tools and what they do, but like Survey 123 is like SurveyMonkey plus maps, right? You know, Story Maps is like web pages with maps. You know, Living Atlas is a tool where you can bring in data not just from Indiana, but global authoritative data sets. It's pretty cool. And you don't have to go and download data and upload data and publish data. It's all there and available for you, right? And there are other tools too, like Quick Capture is kind of a big button data collection thing that you could use, like a homeschool group could use to do citizen science initiatives or something like that, right? I mean, there's plenty of cool tools here that could be used. And we're slowly trying to build up the resources to help the community understand what's available to them. But that might be one, I don't know, that would be one thing that you could do to kind of, that might make GIS relevant to your library and its community that it serves. Sure. I mean, and by the way, I say let's use data instead of feelings. Feelings are good too. But you know, maybe we should be making decisions and having conversations around data instead of how we think things are. We could all do that a little more. Maybe I'd have less anxiety. Does anyone have any other questions? I'm happy to, as you know now, I guess, talk. Did I miss any in the chat? Let me go look.
Please chime in. If you have any other questions for Steve while he's here, either raise your hand or put it in the chat.
And you can always reach out to me. I have a LinkedIn account that I look at least once a month. But my email address is right here, saldrich@iot.in.gov. You know, I don't care if you're not a state employee. If you have a GIS question, go ahead and reach out. I'm happy to at least point you in a direction to get you what you need if I can't help directly, right? Oh, I guess one other thing that I mentioned, if you're interested in learning, like diving into GIS as a skill to develop, if you have access to Esri products, which is they're a private vendor, but they're probably the largest GIS software provider in the world. Most licenses to their technology comes with access to their training academy, which are you know, a variety of different modalities of online and in-person trainings that you can get access to for free, or for the in-person ones, there's cost. But there's also a developing group out of, it's managed through the Polis Center at IU, the Indiana Geospatial Technology Alliance, and they're offering relatively low-priced instructor-led trainings for desktop online GIS, and then just the power of GIS as well. And so they're offering their first desktop client GIS-focused class, I believe in July. And you know, it comes with a registration cost, but if you work for public government, then you get a 10% discount. So it'd be something like $800 something for a multi-day training. I know we're in a resource crunch across many entities in the state, but I did want to, yeah, thanks, Katie. I did want to just kind of put a plug in for them because these are good Indiana faculty and staff, Indiana, Purdue, and Valpo, and they know what they're doing, and they're using Indiana data and Indiana problems to illustrate how to use the software, which is pretty cool. Oh, and GIS Day. In November, the state has GIS Day. You also find IU and Purdue probably both have GIS days as well. So if you're closer to there than downtown Indy, that'd be an option. I think it's November 14th this year. It's a free event similar to MPH's Data Day. Lunch is provided if you register ahead of time. I think we're limited to around 400 attendees. So if you get info about that, either at our GIS Day website that you can get to at in.gov/GIS, or we'll announce it in our monthly newsletter. That'd be a cool way to come and see and participate in what we're doing with GIS in the state. There are private companies, public sector folks from local, county, and planning organization kind of entities, and of course state agencies as well. And it's here at the Indiana Government Center South Conference Center. Okay, I'll stop plugging things.
Thank you so much, Steve. I like to keep people up to date with all of the events, and sometimes it's hard because there are so many good events, and we have such a great geo community here in Indiana.
Yeah.
So please, everyone, keep participating. And thank you so much, Steve, for being with us here today. If you want to get in touch with Steve, his email is in the chat. And also, we work closely with the GIO, so you can contact me as well. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And this was a great meeting. Stay tuned for our next meeting, and it'll be in a couple of months, and I'll be sending out announcements.
Yeah, wait, thank you for inviting me, and it was great talking to you all.